If I were smarter, I would have embedded the first 30 seconds or so of the beginning of Slayer's song Hell Awaits into this PowerPoint just to give it that kind of good demonic vibe as we talk about the problem of evil. What is the problem of evil? You can sort of see it illustrated here in this cartoon where a person is fly fishing and saying to a bystander, "I don't keep what I catch, I just stick a barbed hook in its face, yank it gasping from the water, rip the hook out, and then throw it back in," leaving it to wonder what kind of God would allow such a thing. You see it here in this cartoon as well. Somebody imploring God, "God, why do bad things happen to good people?" God says, "Because it's funny." And then the person responds, "So when my son fell off that bridge," and then you can see God starting to laugh. Right? So these cartoons are hitting at this problem of evil that we're going to explore. Before we get too far into it, though, we want to make sure we're really clear on what exactly the terms of this issue are and what they mean. What is evil? Is evil a concept that has meaning only within a religious context? Or does evil exist outside of religious contexts? A few years ago, I was having dinner with a friend and colleague at the 511, and I said something along the lines of, I think racism is a profound evil. And he kind of laughed, not because he doesn't think racism is wrong, but he laughed and he said, "Well, what's evil?" And I realized, he thinks of evil as a concept like similar to sin. Right? Sin is a concept that has meaning only within a religious context. If you're not a religious person, sin doesn't resonate with you as a meaningful term in your life. You understand what people mean when they use it. They're talking about a particular kind of immorality. But sin is a religious is a concept that has meaning within a religious context. Is evil a similar kind of concept? Well, I guess it would depend on how we define it. So we probably need a term to distinguish some immoral acts from others. If you secretly put anchovies on my pizza and I puke because I can't stand the taste of anchovies, is that evil? Maybe. I mean, that would be really kind of snotty of you, but I don't know if that qualifies as evil. I do think, though, that we might get away, even outside of a religious context, of saying that this week, what I'm living with, what you're living with too, is this horrific school shooting in Texas where like 19 children were slaughtered. What's the term we use for the wrongness of that? And I would submit to you, evil works for me in that context. So as we're moving forward, maybe that's how we think of evil. We think of evil as these intentional actions that people take that result in the profound, needless suffering of others, right? So when we talk about evil in this conversation, that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about really intense, intentional suffering that is needlessly inflicted on others. Why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem because by that definition, you can think of a lot of things that have happened in the world that meet that definition and qualify as evil. And it's a problem because we're exploring this question, does God exist? And we're thinking of the God of the three major monotheistic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And that God is portrayed in a really particular way. Okay, that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good. And the fact that God has created a world where all of these events take place that we could characterize as evil seems to be contradictory to that God's nature, right? To the qualities that are inherent to it. And so for scholars, this creates a contradiction, okay? And you can see here this quote from one of these arguments along these lines: "A God whose nature can be stated only in contradictions cannot possibly exist. And to suppose that there is such a God as that is nonsense." So people look at the qualities of this God and they say, wait a minute, there is a problem here. On the one hand, we could have a reality where evil exists. Things like these school shootings and Holocaust and all the horrific things exist. And they exist in this world because there is no all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good God there to intervene and prevent these things from happening. So that kind of world would make sense, these folks say, that it would have evil because it doesn't have a God. It would also make sense to have a world where this God exists, right? This all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good God exists, and there's no evil taking place in the world. We don't have things like Holocaust because this all-good, all-powerful God knows what's going on because it's all-knowing, can prevent it from happening because it's all-powerful, and would want to prevent it from happening because this God is all-good. That world would make sense. The problem is this. If this God exists, how is it that it exists not in companion, that's the wrong word. How is it that this God exists in reality, and yet this evil also exists in reality? And this is a question that has been raised for thousands of years at this point. You can see it here, this piece from Epicurus. He says, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Well, then he's not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he's malevolent, not all good. Is he both able and willing? Well, then whence, then wherefore, is that what it's saying? Then whence cometh evil? Is he neither, I'm botching this, sorry. Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? Okay, so you can see in here, there's this problem. How is it that this God could have these qualities that we ascribe to it? How could this God actually exist and the world be the way that it is? Okay, so there's a logical problem, folks say, because the argument is this. If an all-good, an omnibenevolent, all-powerful, all-knowing God exists, then the world be free of natural and moral evil. And of course, we know premise 2 is true. The world is not free of natural and moral evil. Therefore, an all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing God does not exist. Okay, so the problem of evil is a problem that folks who say there's good reason for believing this all-powerful, all-good, all-knowing God actually exists have to contend with. How is it logically consistent for that God to exist at the same time this very sort of evil-filled world also exists? These don't seem to be logically consistent, and the argument is going to be made. That is proof that the God you're claiming exists couldn't exist, doesn't exist. All right, so that's what we're going to start to explore here. How could we possibly come up with ways that the world could be the way that it is and contain the horrific things that it does, and there still be in existence this all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good God?